The Final Colony. Chapter 1. Whispers of Oblivion. The sky was not blue, nor was it black. It shimmered with a pale translucence, as though the air itself had forgotten what it meant to hold colour. Alara stood at the edge of the colony's boundary, her breath visible against the chilled void. Beyond the invisible barrier that separated their fragile world from the eternal silence of space, stars blinked like forgotten memories. How long will it hold? She whispered to no one, her voice trembling as much from uncertainty as from the cold. She wasn't expecting an answer. No one ever dared ask these questions aloud. Yet the silence seemed to reply, its weight pressing against her chest like an unspoken truth. The colony had been humanity's last refuge, a construct born of desperation and ingenuity. It was a sphere of reinforced glass and steel suspended above a dying planet that had once been Earth's last hope. Below them stretched a wasteland of toxic ash, where rivers of molten rock cut through barren plains like scars on flesh. It won't hold much longer. The voice startled her. It belonged to Dr. Eli Mordain, the chief engineer and, if rumours were true, the man who had designed the dome's failing shield. He was older than she remembered, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. "You shouldn't be out here, Alara," he added, his tone softer now. "I had to see it," she replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the faint glow of the planet's core pulsed like a dying heartbeat. "Everyone talks about survival, but no one dares to look at what's left of us." Eli sighed, stepping closer. "And what do you see?" "Fragility." She turned to face him, her expression raw. "We've built a tomb in the sky, Eli, a fragile, floating mausoleum, and we call it home." The colony was alive, or so it seemed. The walls hummed faintly, a vibration that resonated through every structure, a reminder that the power grid was still holding. Inside, people moved like shadows, quick, silent, purposeful. They avoided eye contact, their faces pale from years of artificial light and recycled air. Alara walked through the central atrium, her boots echoing against the metal floor. Above her, holographic projections of Earth in its prime flickered, a blue-green paradise that no longer existed. Children sat cross-legged, staring up at the images as if they were fairy tales. "Do you think it was real?" a little boy asked his mother, pointing at the projection of a waterfall cascading over jagged rocks. "Yes, sweetie," the mother replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "That's where we came from." Alara paused, her heart tightening. "We didn't come from there anymore," she thought bitterly. "We came from failure." In the control room, tension hung thick in the air. Screens displayed the colony's vital systems, most of which were blinking red. "The core shield is deteriorating faster than expected," Eli announced to the gathered council. "How much time do we have?" one of the council members demanded, his voice sharp with panic. "Months? Weeks?" Eli hesitated. "Days, perhaps." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, accusations flew, and desperation crackled like static. Alara, standing unnoticed in the corner, felt the weight of their fear. It was the same fear she'd carried since she was a child, the fear of endings. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the din. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "We've spent years clinging to survival, patching systems, rationing resources, hoping for miracles. But have we ever stopped to ask, what's next? What do we do when there's nothing left to fix?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling where faint cracks had begun to form. The hum of the colony's systems was louder now, a reminder that everything was on borrowed time. She thought of the archives, the forbidden records stored deep within the colony. Rumours swirled about what they contained. Maps to other habitable planets, ancient technology, perhaps even secrets of the catastrophe that had doomed Earth. The council had deemed the archives dangerous, locked away from the desperate hands of the colony's dwindling population. But Alara knew she had to see them. If there was even a chance of salvation, she had to try. The entrance to the archives was hidden behind a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels. Alara's hands trembled as she entered the access codes she had memorized from stolen glimpses at Eli's console. The door slid open with a low hiss, revealing rows of dusty terminals and holographic displays. The room smelled of metal and neglect, a stark contrast to the sterile air of the colony. Alara approached one of the terminals and hesitated. What if the rumors were true? What if the answers she found only confirmed their doom? Her fingers hovered over the activation panel. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed it. The terminal whirred to life and a soft voice echoed through the chamber. "Welcome, user. Accessing classified data." Alara's heart pounded as lines of code scrolled across the screen. Then suddenly an image appeared. A star map, intricate and glowing. Her breath caught. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Coordinates blinked on the screen and the voice spoke again. "Destination located. Viable refuge detected. Warning, journey is high risk." Alara stared at the map, her mind racing. Could this be it? Was this their chance? Behind her a shadow moved. She spun around, her pulse quickening. Eli stepped into the dim light, his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said quietly. "Neither were you," she shot back, her voice steady despite her fear. Eli's gaze shifted to the terminal. "Do you know what you found?" "I think so," she replied. "The question is, why didn't you tell anyone?" Eli sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Because some truths are too dangerous, but now that you know, there's no turning back." The map glowed faintly, casting strange shadows across the room. Alara's heart raced as she studied the coordinates, her mind torn between hope and dread. The prospect of leaving the colony, of finding something beyond this dying tomb in the sky, was intoxicating. But what would it cost? Behind her, Eli's voice broke the silence. "You think this is salvation? It's not. It's a gamble, a dangerous one." Alara turned sharply. "A gamble is better than waiting for this place to collapse. You knew there was hope out there, and you chose to keep it from us. Why?" Eli hesitated, his hands tightening into fists. "Because not everyone would make it. We don't have the resources to take the whole colony. Do you understand? If we reveal this, it will tear us apart. People will fight, riot, kill for the chance to leave." Alara's chest tightened. "So you just decided for everyone? You played God with their lives?" Eli stepped closer, his expression hard. "I kept this secret to protect what little we have left. Do you think survival is easy? Do you think it's fair?" His voice cracked, the weight of years of guilt pressing down on him. "I've seen what desperation does to people. You have no idea what's coming." Later, back in her quarters, Alara paced relentlessly. Eli's words churned in her mind, his warnings circling like vultures. The coordinates were burned into her memory. But what could she do with them? Share them with the council? No, they'd lock her away, just like they'd buried the archives. Her gaze fell on the small photo beside her cot. It was old, the edges frayed, but it was her anchor. Her mother, smiling under a sunlit sky, holding Alara as a child. A world she could barely remember. "What would you do, Mom?" she whispered. "Would you stay and wait to die, or risk everything for a chance to live?" The answer was already forming in her heart, even as fear gnawed at her resolve. The next morning, Alara sought out the only person she knew she could trust, Commander Dane, the head of the colony's security forces. He was a man of principles, known for his fairness and unshakable loyalty to the people. "You're risking a lot coming here," Dane said as Alara stepped into his office. His sharp eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "What's on your mind?" Alara took a deep breath. "I found something in the archives, something the council doesn't want us to know." Dane leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Go on." She told him everything, the map, the coordinates, the potential refuge beyond the colony. As she spoke, Dane's jaw tightened and his fingers drummed against the desk. "You're sure about this?" he asked when she finished. "Yes," she said firmly. "I saw it myself. The data is real. We have a chance to leave, but Eli's afraid of what will happen if the truth gets out." Dane stood and began pacing. "He's not wrong. This colony is barely holding together as it is. If people find out, there's a way out." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "So what do we do?" Alara asked, her voice low. "Just keep it a secret? Let everyone die here?" Dane stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No, we find out if it's real. Quietly. If this refuge exists, we can plan. But if it's a dead end, we don't give anyone false hope." Under the cover of night, Alara and Dane slipped into the docking bay. Most of the colony was asleep, their dreams haunted by the hum of failing systems. The bay was eerily silent, the faint glow of emergency lights casting long shadows over the sleek, dormant ships. "This is the one," Dane whispered, pointing to a small reconnaissance vessel. It's fast, discreet, and has enough range to reach those coordinates. Alara hesitated as they approached the ship. What if we don't come back? Dane glanced at her, his expression somber. Then at least we'll know we tried. They worked quickly, loading supplies and running diagnostics. The ship hummed to life, its engines a soft purr against the silence. As they prepared for departure, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "We're clear," Dane said, breaking her thoughts. "Let's go." The launch was smooth, the colony shrinking behind them until it was just a faint glimmer against the void. Alara stared out the window, her chest tightening as the stars stretched before them. It was the first time she had seen them like this, unfiltered, unbound by the dome's failing barrier. "They're beautiful," she murmured. Dane glanced at her but said nothing, his focus on the ship's controls. As they neared the coordinates, the onboard systems began to glitch. The map flickered, and alarms blared. "What's happening?" Alara shouted, gripping the console. "Something's interfering with the systems," Dane replied, his voice steady but tense. "Hold on!" The ship shuddered violently as a massive structure emerged from the darkness, a towering monolith of alien design, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "What is that?" Alara whispered, her breath catching in her throat. Before Dane could respond, a beam of light shot from the monolith, engulfing the ship. Everything went white, and for a moment Alara felt weightless, her thoughts scattering like dust. When the light faded, they were no longer in space. The ship hovered in a vast chamber, its walls lined with glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Where are we?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. Dane stared at the symbols, his expression grim. "I don't know, but I don't think we're alone." The ship hovered in the vast chamber, its engines humming softly as if hesitant to disturb the stillness of the unknown. Alara gripped the console tightly, her knuckles white, eyes fixed on the strange alien structure that loomed outside the ship's transparent canopy. The monolith's surface shimmered, like liquid metal in a perpetual state of flux, its presence overwhelming, as though it were alive, breathing in the void. Dane, at the controls, remained eerily calm, his gaze locked on the monolith. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered under his breath, tapping the controls as though trying to coax the ship into responding. "Are you getting any readings?" Alara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile calm that had settled over them. "None. The ship's systems are scrambled. I can't get a clear signal from any of the sensors," Dane replied, his fingers flying across the interface, but nothing seemed to make sense. Alara glanced back at the monolith. It seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm, an eerie cadence that resonated in her chest. She shivered, though the temperature within the ship remained constant. The feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, without warning, the ship lurched. Alara's body was thrown forward, slamming into the seat's harness, her breath knocked out of her. The lights flickered, and alarms began blaring in the cabin. "What the hell is happening?" she shouted, struggling to regain her bearings. "I don't know." Dane's voice was strained, a rare crack in his usually steady demeanor. "It's like the ship's being pulled in." The monolith's light grew brighter, bathing the ship in an almost blinding white. The air inside the cabin thickened, pressing in on Alara's chest, as if the very atmosphere was trying to squeeze the life out of them. She could feel the ship's systems faltering. One by one, the consoles flickered and went dark. Panic clawed at her, but she fought it down, forcing herself to focus. "Brace yourself!" Dane yelled as the ship bucked again, spinning uncontrollably. Then, silence. The ship stopped moving, and the lights returned to their normal dim glow. Alara opened her eyes, her vision blurred from the disorienting sequence of events. She wiped her forehead, trembling from the sudden crash of adrenaline. "Dane?" Her voice was shaky. He was still at the controls, eyes wide, staring out of the canopy. The monolith was gone. In its place, a deep, endless darkness stretched before them. "What just happened?" Alara asked, breathless. I don't know," Dane replied, his voice distant. "It was as if the monolith, or whatever that was, pulled us in, but where did it go? It's like we've slipped between worlds." A cold sweat dripped down Alara's spine. They weren't just in another part of space, they were somewhere else, somewhere they couldn't comprehend. She turned her attention to the monitors. Static filled the screens, a constant white noise, but then something caught her eye. A faint outline, like a structure, emerging in the distance. It was too far to make out, but it was there. "Dane," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to go toward that structure. Now." He didn't need any further persuasion. The ship jerked into motion again, cutting through the void, its engines sputtering but slowly finding their rhythm. Alara could feel every vibration in her bones as they neared the object, its form becoming clearer with every passing second. It was a massive city, its towering structures stretching into the darkness, made of the same shifting metal as the monolith. As they drew closer, the ship's systems began to stabilize. Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She glanced at Dane, whose jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the unknown cityscape before them. "Do you think anyone's here?" Alara asked, her voice almost a whisper. "If there are, they're not showing themselves." Dane's eyes flickered to the empty, desolate city. "But we need to be cautious. There's something about this place that doesn't feel right. It's too quiet." The ship landed in the center of a vast square, the metal floor of the city's surface seeming to absorb the ship's weight, as if the city itself was alive and waiting. Alara unbuckled her harness and stood slowly, her muscles stiff from the sudden change in movement. She turned to Dane, who had already opened the hatch. The moment he stepped outside, the strange atmosphere of the place hit her. A heavy silence, broken only by the hum of distant machinery, far off yet unnervingly close. The air was thick, like it had been sealed off for centuries. "Stay close," Dane muttered as he walked ahead, his hand resting on the gun holstered at his side. He was always prepared, always cautious. But something in his eyes told Alara that even he didn't know what they were about to face. They moved cautiously through the city's eerily empty streets, their footsteps the only sound in the vast expanse. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meanings incomprehensible, etched into the metal like forgotten words. The architecture was alien, unlike anything Alara had ever seen, a mixture of organic and mechanical, as though it had been grown rather than built. After what felt like an eternity, they came to a central chamber, a massive open space with a glowing orb suspended in the air at its center. The orb pulsed with a soft light, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "What is this?" Alara whispered, stepping closer, entranced by the orb's strange energy. Dane approached carefully, his hand reaching out toward it. "I don't know, but it feels familiar, like it's calling us." The moment his hand touched the orb, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Alara gasped, stumbling back. The walls around them began to shift, the symbols glowing brighter, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with energy. Suddenly a voice boomed in their minds, deep and resonating, as if coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, travelers. You are the first to reach us in millennia. Do you understand the price of your journey?" Alara's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Dane, who was as stunned as she was. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The voice echoed again, this time with a note of amusement. "We are the architects of your salvation, or your undoing. What you seek is not a gift, but a choice. What will you offer in exchange for what you seek?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Alara's pulse quickened, her thoughts spinning. What was this place, and what price would they have to pay? The chamber pulsed with light, casting eerie reflections across the smooth, metallic walls. Alara could feel the weight of the voice in her mind, its presence pressing against her thoughts, as though it were trying to peel back her memories layer by layer. Beside her, Dane stood frozen, his hand hovering over his weapon. "What do you mean? A price?" Alara asked, her voice breaking the suffocating silence. "We didn't come here to bargain, we came to survive." The orb pulsed again, its glow intensifying. "Survival always has a cost, child," the voice said, calm but relentless. "Your people have lived on borrowed time for centuries. This colony, this relic of your existence, was never meant to endure. You seek a future, but futures are built on sacrifice." Alara exchanged a glance with Dane. His jaw was set, his eyes hard, but she could see the unease flickering in his expression. "What kind of sacrifice?" Dane demanded. His voice was steady, but his grip on his weapon tightened. The chamber seemed to ripple, the walls shifting as if alive. The voice spoke again, its tone sharper now. "We offer you life. We offer you a world where your kind can flourish, unbound by the decay of your present. But for this gift, one of you must stay. This place requires a guardian, someone to anchor its power and ensure its purpose. Without one, the gateway cannot be sustained. The choice is yours." The words hit like a blow. Alara's breath caught in her chest, her mind racing. She stepped closer to Dane, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They want one of us to stay here? Alone? Forever?" "It's madness," Dane hissed back, his voice low but firm. "We didn't come all this way to be manipulated by some alien force. There has to be another way." The orb pulsed again, as though responding to their defiance. "There is no other way," the voice said, its tone carrying a note of finality. "Your colony's systems will fail within months. Your people will perish. This is your only hope." The weight of the ultimatum pressed down on them. Alara's mind spun with images of the colony, the worn faces of families clinging to life, the children who had never seen the sun, the constant hum of failing machinery that echoed through every corridor. She turned to Dane, her voice trembling. "If we don't do this, everyone back home dies. We can't let that happen." "And if we agree?" Dane shot back. "One of us becomes, what? A prisoner? A puppet for this thing? We don't even know if it's telling the truth." Alara shook her head, her resolve hardening. "We can't afford to gamble with their lives, Dane. We have to try." The silence between them stretched heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Dane exhaled and lowered his weapon. "If anyone stays," he said, his voice rough, "it's me. You're younger, smarter. The colony needs you more than it needs an old soldier." "No!" Alara's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "You've given your life to protect those people. Let me do this. It's my turn." Dane shook his head, his expression resolute. "This isn't about turns, Alara. It's about who's better equipped for this, and it's not you." The orb pulsed brighter, its light almost blinding now. "The decision must be made. Time grows short." "No!" Alara screamed, turning to the orb. "There has to be another way. Let us both leave and we'll find a solution together." The voice didn't answer immediately. The chamber dimmed, the pulsing slowing as if the entity was contemplating her plea. Finally it spoke, softer this time. "There is no other way. The gateway requires a mind to sustain it. Without one, it will collapse, and your people's fate will be sealed." Dane stepped forward, his shoulders squared. "It's me," he said firmly. "Take me. Let her go." "No." Alara grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "I can't let you do this." He turned to her, his face softer now. "You can, Alara. You have to. The colony needs you, and you'll carry this forward. Make sure they remember why this happened, why we had to make this choice." Tears blurred her vision, but she nodded, her heart breaking under the weight of his words. She stepped back as the orb's light engulfed Dane, lifting him off the ground. His expression didn't waver, even as his body began to merge with the glowing energy, his form dissolving into the light. "I'll keep them safe," Alara whispered, her voice cracking. "I promise." The chamber trembled, the light growing brighter until it became unbearable. Alara shielded her eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. When the light finally dimmed, the orb was gone. In its place stood a figure, Dane, or what remained of him. His body was translucent, his features blurred, but his eyes were the same. "You must go," he said, his voice resonating with the same power as the monoliths. "The gateway is open. Lead them to safety." Alara hesitated, her heart aching. "Dane, go," he repeated, his tone soft but commanding. "There's no time." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and turned back toward the ship. The way out was clear now, a shimmering path leading back to the stars. As the ship ascended, Alara looked back at the city. It glowed faintly, the structures pulsing in unison, as though alive. She knew she would never see Dane again, but his sacrifice would save them all. The coordinates appeared on the console, a new path leading to a habitable world, a second chance for humanity. As the ship sped toward the colony, Alara clenched her fists, her determination solidifying. She would honor Dane's sacrifice, and she would make sure humanity thrived in its new home. But deep in her heart, she knew the cost of survival would haunt her forever. The end.